Hi, I'd like to welcome everyone here tonight to the joint meeting of Carson City Open Space Advisory Committee and the Parks and Recreation Commission. I expect we'll probably have another Park and Rec member or two coming. Leanne Keever is here. She's the chairperson of that group, and I'll be letting her take over here in a minute. But I just wanted to say hello, welcome everyone to the meeting, and have a call to order. So for the start of the meeting, let's see, we need a roll call. Could you roll call the Open Space Committee?
Open Space Advisory Committee, Chairperson Scott.
Here.
Vice Chair Welsh.
Here.
Member Evans.
Here.
Member Hall.
Here.
Member Inverson.
Here.
Member Masad.
Here.
Member Michael. A quorum's present for Open Space Advisory Committee. For the Parks and Rec members, Chairperson Keever.
Here.
Vice Chair Curtis.
Here.
Commissioner Bagwell.
Here.
Commissioner Cassiopo. Commissioner Glenn. Commissioner Lehman. Commissioner Long.
Here.
A quorum's present.
Great, thank you very much. At this point, we'll have public comments, and we see some members of the public. Open Space isn't used to this, so we're glad to see some folks. We would ask you to limit your comments to items not on the agenda, and to keep your items as succinct and specific as you can. Are there any public comments at this time? All right. Seeing none, we will, of course, call for public comments. Yes, I'm sorry. Jennifer, we have a public comment.
I apologize.
From our Parks and Rec Director.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Madam Chair, Jennifer Budge, Parks and Recreation Director. I just wanted to take a moment. I didn't want to put this on the agenda, so it could be a surprise. And we could just thank and acknowledge Donna Inverson for all of her years in supporting the Easy Walk program. She is going to be passing the torch on that program, and we just wanted to take just a moment to thank her for all of her efforts, her hard work, for encouraging the community to participate in this great program and seeing it move forward. And we have a little plaque to just thank her for that. So,
Great, thank you. Congratulations, Donna, that's great. You do a lot of things in a lot of ways, and we appreciate that.
Well, thank you. I was not expecting that.
Well, good. That's the idea. Okay, we have minutes here for consideration. You have the minutes of the Open Space meeting on October 16th. Members of the Open Space Advisory Committee, do we have any comments or changes to the minutes? I would make one note on page 2 of the minutes, page 3 of the minutes, at the top near C, there's at the second to the last line in the first full paragraph that says, Member Masad was informed that the February 2017 meeting will take place on the 18th. I think that refers to the December 2017 meeting. And Mr. Masad obviously got the message because he's here. So that's the only thing I had. Did anybody else have any questions or comments? Okay. We have a motion to approve.
I move to approve the minutes
Of
the October 16th Open Space Advisory Committee with the change that Chairperson Scott noted.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, thank you. All right, you have some minutes.
All right. Has everybody on the Parks and Recreation Commission been able to read the minutes from October 3rd, 2017? Any corrections or modifications? All right. I'll entertain a motion.
I move to approve the minutes of,
October 3rd.
October 3rd, 2017.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. The motion carries.
Okay, next item, do we have any modifications to the agenda? Okay.
don't.
No modifications. All right. We have item 3A, presentation by Julie Conway and Karen Mullen-Ely. How do you say it?
Karen Mullen is not here tonight, and her name is pronounced Karen Mullen-Ely.
Okay. Regarding Assembly Bill 379, a short little bill that was in our packet, Park District legislation approved during the 2017 legislative session. So we're going to be listening to that review and discussion of potential options for Carson City. And if you could introduce the alter ego to Karen, that would be great.
Good evening. My name is Julie Conway, and I am very pleased to be here tonight to present the overview of Assembly Bill 379. And first, let me say thank you very much for having me come tonight. Karen was interested and very active in the entire effort of this bill. Unfortunately, she was not able to make it tonight. So I will be doing a brief presentation to you on this bill, and also will certainly entertain any clarifications after my presentation. Is there anything you have questions about before I get started? Okay, I know you have the written copy of the presentation, and I'll be going over the PowerPoint presentation briefly. First, let me say I want to extend my thanks to you as committee and commission members. As a resident of Northern Nevada, it's really important as citizens what you do. And as a citizen myself here, I am very pleased that there are so many active members and that are concerned about the livability of our community. And so first, I want to say thank you for that and for committing to be here tonight. And that's tough with the holidays and all of that. So getting right into this, what I'd like to do is to brief what you have in front of you and fill in the blanks, and also provide some background as to the bill. I'm glad that you were sent the bill. I would imagine you probably didn't read it line by line, but I know that you were active through the process and were aware of it as the bill came forward this last legislative session. And I appreciate you taking the time again to do this. So an overview on this is that this effort was a 2-year effort initiated and forwarded by citizens. It came from grassroots effort here in the state. And it was and is a statewide application and can be a statewide application of this measure. So it's not only for Northern Nevada or Eastern Nevada or Southern Nevada. It is a statewide measure. Also, I wanted to highlight that it is 100% elective for a community to engage this law within their community or communities. Elective, there is no mandate to do anything if you do not want to do anything, and it's very flexible how it is applied. So what may work in Northern Nevada or Southern Nevada may not work for Pahrump or Panoche. It may be different, and so it can be applied how the citizens want to apply it in their community. And then also, this was born out of the Chapter 318 of the Title 25 of the legislation, and which is a general improvement district type of governance. So that's where this bill was emanated from. So what does it do? What is the essence of it? And what it is that this Nevada state law defines the development of a district focused 100% on parks, trails, open space, and recreation, including the formation. It also discusses operation and maintenance, funding, and the governance structure of a district. And there are other examples in the state of, some people call them special districts. Here, we call them districts. So this is something that this is the essence of what it is. It's 100% focused on parks, trails, open space. And previously, nothing like this existed in the state of Nevada. You may have thought that there was something like this, but as I referenced before, Chapter 318 references all types of districts. This is only focused 100% on this particular topic, which is very critical. Having worked in both the state of Oregon, also in Washington, myself, and been involved with California professionally, this is important that we as a state embrace this type of tool for our communities. So why was it needed? Well, the citizens that worked on developing this, which was then eventually was a focused effort by Assemblywoman Joyner, this was an opportunity to really focus, and the citizens felt to bring together and really hone in on a mutual vision, mutual efforts related to the topic of parks, open space, and trails, which heretofore had not happened. It is really a governance tool to improve the effectiveness and the efficiency and accountability to the citizens related to governing parks, recreation, open space, and trails. One of the things that came out of this, or that emanated from this, is that, as you know, we are continuing to experience the population increase in our area, and the projections in some ways scare people because of what we anticipate will happen in the future with the expansion and growth of our communities, not only here in Northern Nevada but throughout the state. And the citizens really felt the time had come that we needed this type of tool to help meet the demands, the unmet demands. And then the other part that was really critical is that the citizens saw what had happened with the recession and what happened statewide. This happened statewide with funding and making a priority for parks, trails, and open space, and that those priorities shifted to other activities, and that really was and is of great concern. And through the recovery effort, that the refocus on these priorities the citizens feel are important has not really happened, and there are many, many competing priorities. So again, this was part of the motivation to bring this tool to bear so that there could be a better tool to help fund and govern parks and recreation facilities. So I know that many people have asked me, well, okay, we have a bill, this is hunky-dory, how would a process start? And my focus tonight for you is to give you an overview of the bill, overview of some of the key areas. I am more than happy if there are additional information that you need, or additional really focus on certain areas that you have questions about. I can come back, or we can come back and talk about that certainly through Jen, and I'm happy to do that. But in essence, looking at a district formation, how would that happen? Well, the actual bill, Section 8, really lays it out clearly, very clearly in Section 8 of the bill. So in highlighting that, and I've really distilled it in, I would say, simplify it so that I can easily present it tonight. But Section 8 kind of spells it out legally in other ways. So that is that certainly it's initiated by citizens, or it can be initiated by the electeds of a city or county. Now, previously, Chapter 318, the General Improvement District, cities could not initiate a special district. It would only be counties or citizens. So that's something new. That's a new opportunity. Also, the next step is that the development and approval of a service plan. The service plan is really the key focus of developing and looking at what a special district could do. That's really very, very important. Certainly, and throughout this, written notice is sent to all property owners within the affected boundaries, and the entity who initiates this may elect to seek a majority approval of the citizens who live within that proposed district as well. And that is a key component of this and very important. The other next step, and again, when I talk about these, they're not, do not take it as simplistically, you go from one to the next to the next. There's a very deliberate process that must be gone through, and that was written into the bill to make sure there's public input, to make sure it's a thoughtful process, to make sure it's evaluated. So the next part, having received and gone through and developed a service plan, would be to convene public hearings, seek feedback on the service plan, eventually with the approval of the service plan by the initiating body, whether it be city and or county, depending upon how broad the district boundaries are. And then the other part of this, to move to the next step, is that the initial board members of the Board of Trustees, there are 5 members on the board. The initial members, the bill contemplates that the initial board for the first 5 years, or till the first election, would be the electeds, whether it be, let's say that you had 2 or 3 counties that this district was covering, then each of the elected bodies would appoint one of their members or a member to be on this board. And then by intergovernmental agreement, which again, we always go back to that, by intergovernmental agreement, or IGA, then the additional board members would be appointed through that agreement. So that's how it occurs. There also is identified in the bill, if there's more than 5 county or entities, 5 or more, then each entity gets 1 representative. And then at that point, at the first election, the board is elected from those that live within the district boundary. So there is an election that's held with the overall general election that occurs within our communities. So with that being said, and then of course there is, that's how it's initiated. And then again in Section 8, it talks about what's the next step. It goes through that process. So I think it's important that you understand the depth and breadth of the analysis that needs to be done with developing a district, and that is embodied in the service plan. So in that service plan, there are some key components to this that are spelled out. Number 1, looking at the financial feasibility of it. Is it needed? Outlining the services that would be provided by the district, the financial structure, what are the financing alternatives. It would certainly have a boundary map. How large would the district be? And what are the population estimates and the demographics of that area? That would be included. Then you have your facility improvement proposed project list, not only existing facilities, but what might be proposed in the future. Either enhancements to what's there or new facilities, and that also in that area includes the operation and maintenance, which is obviously very, very critical. And then also in the service plan would be any intergovernmental agreements. We referred them as IGAs, and those IGAs would spell out how different governmental units, whether it be a city or county, or maybe there's another special district that abuts, or is it within that boundary, how they're going to work together, what resources they might share, what type of agreement they might have to help promote the development of a district and move it forward. Then there are several questions that have come up always about, well, what are some of the financing options? And as it brings forward, as I just shared with you in the service plan, that's pretty succinct. This is what you need to do. You put that service plan together, and that's what goes forward to the citizens and other governmental units. So the financing options, some of them are included here. There could be others, but some of them include what I have outlined here, and those are embodied and included in the service plan. They include intergovernmental revenue, so sharing revenue, certainly user fees, rate assessments on those that live within the boundary, any type of property tax ad valorem. Remember, this is a statewide measure, and as you probably are aware, Washoe County to the north of you is at the cap. So that would not be the case with Washoe County. They're at the cap at this point. So sometime in the future, if that changes, it would be different. But at the current time, there could not be any direct tax, ad valorem tax assessed for the district, directly from the district. Contract services, as well as grants and donations. So that gives you an idea of some of them. As I mentioned at the beginning of my presentation, there are other districts within the state of Nevada, not many, but there are some. Many of you are familiar with Incline Village General Improvement District, and they do provide Parks and Recreation services as part of their cadre of services. There are over 1,400 nationwide, and some of them are outlined here that have been looked at, and there are others in Idaho, Colorado, Utah, and looking at some similar facilities and demographics and geographic similarities as to some of the other districts. We reviewed all that, presented that to the legislature because they wanted to know what other communities have done. So we did a nice little matrix to show what others have done in other areas. I think one that is similar to Northern Nevada, similar but not exactly the same, is the Bend Metro Park and Recreation District in Central Oregon. And that's something geographically, that it's similar as far as what we might have here. So, with that being said, just in summary, what is important to remember about this is that it was a citizen initiative that came up from citizens to forward it to our legislature to have them review it. We're very pleased that they did and they approved it into law, and that was it became effective July 1st of this year. And it is a new tool. It's a tool in the toolbox that we can use. And again, it's elective. It's not mandatory. There's some significant built-in mechanisms to help promote citizen involvement, feedback, and public engagement in the process. And it is also fashioned so that eventually, as the district is formed and the governance structure, the individuals who would govern the district are elected by those that are within the district. So they're not from the outside, they come from those who live within they would live within the boundary, and that's how it would be governed. So with that, again, I thank you for your attention, and if there's any clarifications that I can provide you, I'd be happy to do that. If there's something that I either don't know or need to research a little bit more, I'd be happy to get back to Jen at a future date. So thank you again. Any clarifications I can provide you on the measure?
Thank you, Julie. If you'd stick around, I'm going to ask staff if they have anything to add, and then we'll ask the members of Parks and Rec and Open Space if they have any specific questions, and then we'll go to public comments. So, Jen?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Jennifer Budge, Parks and Recreation Director. First, I just wanted to thank Julie for being here and for her time. She's a real champion for parks, and if you don't know Julie, she has a long history in Northern Nevada, is a real good champion, and worked with Assemblywoman Joyner on this, among other citizens that brought this forward. So it's really amazing what can be accomplished from a citizen level and bringing that forward. And this does give us an option moving forward. It gives us something to consider down the road if we ever got into a position where we thought that might be in our best interest or working with other jurisdictions. So just having that option available to us, I think, is a great step forward. There are a lot of park districts, as Julie said, throughout the country. I used to work for one, Truckee-Donner Recreation and Park District, and it was really a great sustainable way to support a park system, and one that's a good one in the area that I think could be an example for all of us. So I think right now we're still in the information gathering stage and trying to wrap our head around what could even be the options. And I know the Parks Foundation has been very interested in hearing this presentation and just trying to, keep all of our options available moving forward. And I think some of the Parks Foundation folks are here and might have some questions, I think, for Julie as well. But we're happy to come back to you, provide updates, and see what might work, if that is something that the citizens would like to do.
Thank you. Yeah, it's informational and new to us too, but it's interesting to hear about. We'll get to any of Parks and Recreation Foundation folks in a minute. Are there any comments or questions from Open Space? Alan?
Carson City's unique in Nevada in that we don't have a county. Ormsby had a tough time. He lost his county, and now he's just got a house, and it's got problems. But I was wondering if you had any examples you'd like to point out of districts that have a similar governance, where the county and the city are one.
I don't know of one off the top of my head. I'm sure I have it in the research that I've done, but I'd prefer to not speak out of turn, but I'd be happy to get back to you, Mr. Welsh.
I just have a comment. I've actually, most of my life, I've lived in areas where this is the way it worked. And I found it very beneficial because when hard times came around, Parks and Recs were not then dropped and just basically left to fend for themselves. They still had a revenue base, even though it might decrease a little bit with home values. Where I lived, it was always based on your property tax. And two, there's been a real concern, at least I've had a very big concern with all the new development going here in Carson City. Parks and Rec weren't necessarily going to be seen in the revenue increase to help them support all these new homes and families. And with this type of thing, then you have that available to Parks and Recreation. So I think this is really important, and it's really exciting that at this point we're even considering this, something like this.
Thank you, Donna. Any other comments or questions from Open Space? Over to you.
Thank you. Any questions or comments from the Parks and Recreation? Commissioner Curtis?
Hi. First of all, I want to congratulate you and Karen for getting legislation through the first time. That doesn't happen that often. So very good job. I went to a luncheon in October that was given by the state parks. I don't think you were there, but Karen was. And so she made a presentation on this. And so I made some notes from what she had to say, and I kind of like to go over those in a way just to kind of reinforce some of the things that you said. But first of all, I have a couple of questions about the trustees, or whatever they're called. Initially, let's say it was just in Carson. So initially, it would be the Board of Supervisors, I guess, that would be the trustees. And then, we would go from there. Or can they always be the trustees? And secondly, if we were to do something else, could a group such as the Parks Commission be the trustees, or some of them, or how does that work?
Right. In reference to the presentation, I happened to be out of town at that time, so Karen and I do tag team on this effort, so I'm glad that she was available. So referencing your question about the Board of Trustees, the law spells out the initial board is automatically the electeds who initiate or the majority of the boundary is within that jurisdictional area. That governing board, those electeds, are responsible to be the Board of Trustees. So they appoint. Now, they could appoint themselves, or if they feel like they want to appoint somebody else, for example, a member from these groups, they could do that. However, the measure is very clear that it says they make the appointment for the first initial Board of Trustees. Then it states that at the next available election, then that's where the election is they call it qualified electors. So the people that live within the district then are the ones that vote for the next Board of Trustees. So any member here could run for the board, but at that point, they are not appointed by the electeds. Somebody has to run from within the district boundary. But the whole thing contemplates that the initial 5 years, if you will, 3 to 5 years, is that there needs to be some stability and to be able to get the district off and running. So that's why the governing board that starts the district is the one that appoints them in the beginning.
If I may, I'll just make a couple of points from, the meeting that I attended. One of the things that seems to be in the bill, which sounded really good to me, it says, cannot supplant funding under another tax base. In other words, if we were to form this district and say it were to be collecting, I don't know, $1 million, that doesn't mean that the general fund support or the Question 18 support that we have in Carson City would be then reduced. Because we have this additional revenue. Is that correct?
That is correct. However, let me just qualify that to a certain point. You cannot tax people twice for the same service. That's the bottom line. So the district would identify what types of services that it is providing that are not already being funded. And we know that there are a lot of services that are not being funded. However, the new district, for example, if it were here, the new district could not then tax people twice for what Question 18 is already partially providing. But trust me, there are many more services than Question 18 is funding currently. So there was an opportunity to have the district provide greater service. However, you cannot tax people twice for the same service. So that, in summary, that's what that means.
Another point was a question that I asked in terms of going through the legislation. What were some of the objections from, legislative members or, people that were testifying, et cetera. Apparently, there wasn't a lot. In fact, Karen mentioned there was a lot of support from the rurals on this, so it sounds like it definitely would be a good tool and we're considered a rural here, and of course, if we were to join with other jurisdictions nearby, maybe we could form, even something different. But it was good that it didn't sound like there was a lot of people, because you mentioned the word tax, and all of a sudden they come out of the woodwork, and apparently that didn't happen that much. People, approved it. So, is that correct?
Yes, that is correct, and we absolutely spent several hours. I remember one meeting we had when we probably had 25 people around the table that were either electeds or representatives of the electeds, and worked with conservation districts who were concerned that this would take the place of what they do and be duplicative. And so we had to explain that it would not be duplicative, and we actually put language in the bill to make sure that it would not be perceived as that. So that's the kind of, in the end it wasn't opposition, but that's the kind of thing that we worked with individuals and representatives to make sure that it was not, that people would seek favor. And in the end they did, and I appreciate your recognition that it did pass in the first try. That is literally unheard of. So we thought that was a bellwether to the type of what we were trying to do, and we as citizens feel that it was a real sign, actually, that the time had come to add this tool to the toolbox. Thank you.
One more. Karen mentioned that it could be kind of pricey to try to go through this process and form this district. She said from anything like $300,000 to $500,000 even, maybe, to get all the studies together and do the campaign, et cetera, et cetera. So that's just maybe kind of a caveat that, if we want to consider going forward, we better consider how we're going to afford to put this proposal together.
Well, certainly, it depends on the community of what the cost, and we haven't put any cost on or estimates on what it might cost to put it together. The service plan, as I delineated, and that's why I wanted to spend time on that, that's the focus point on what it will take to put that together. And there are very, very qualified consultants or NGOs, non-governmental organizations that can help with that. And I believe that there are some grants that can help with this as well. So not to dismiss or diminish what it may cost, because it will be costly. However, I believe that there are some funding mechanisms out there to do that, and at this point, I'm not putting a cost price tag on it until we look at what we have and how many entities might be involved.
Commissioner Bagwell? Oh, sorry.
Oh, I just wanted to mention that I am from the Parks Foundation. I don't think anybody else is here, so when it's turn to do that, I can speak for that, too.
Commissioner Bagwell?
So I'm more interested in, potentially you can go back to the slide that showed us the funding toolbox for the financing maybe. So if I look at Carson City, which kind of follows along someone else's line, right now we're a park district of one for other issues that we have. We're one district. Do you find that this is more conducive when you want to do something regionally, like maybe you have a park that crosses the boundaries of two jurisdictions, and so you're looking for a mechanism to set up a user fee? So I'm trying to understand how I could use it in Carson City when I already charge a user fee for the community center, or I already charge a user fee for the kids to play soccer. And so is it really a rate assessment per property and a property tax that generates the dedicated income? And that's where the rubber more meets the road, is it's doing an ad valorem tax in all those other district examples?
Your microphone.
A couple different things. I think it's important to look at this as a different governance structure. So number one, as I mentioned, it's a very focused effort towards only this purpose. So all of the funding, all of the revenue, all of the expenses, they're accounted for and appropriated just for that particular area. You're correct in that there is a cost benefit in having a greater geographically enlarged area. Because it helps to bring together united efforts and look at, as we grow, and I say we in the royal sense, as we grow as a northern Nevada or a southern Nevada, we ought to look at this more holistically. So there's greater benefit if you look at greater than just one little area. However, and I'm trying to think of an area that comes to mind. I think there's one in Colorado where it started out as one city, pretty much, and then as it grew, it became, came larger. It grew as well, and so that increased its ability to raise revenue, as well as certainly user fees and all of that. So number one, it's better if you enlarge the area, expand the area to look to the future, because that's what this is about, is where are we going in the future? And then secondly, to your point of the funding mechanism, the rate assessment is, and you could look at the Sun Valley General Improvement District. Right now, they, like Incline Village, but they have a rate assessment for only Parks and Recreation. I want to say it's around $2.50 a month. I mean, it's very, very small, just for Parks and Rec. And they operate within Washoe County. They're very small. They only do certain things for Parks and Rec. Now, if they wanted to, let's say they wanted to be involved with this in some way, shape, or form, they would have to agree to it. They would have to be involved with it. this would help expand what they could do exponentially. So they have a rate assessment. That's what I'm talking about there. The ad valorem tax, obviously, is a Washoe County, that would be a Washoe County, and they would share that with the district if that's the agreement that would come to bear. So those are certainly the two major funding sources that come out of this, and a benefit for having a district that's greater than a small geographic area. But it's not the only funding that comes through a district formation. But that's how it would form and how it would be done.
The reason I'm asking is I'm trying for people to understand the difference between this methodology and what we currently have in the city is, I believe I already have, other than the regional across county lines, I already have the ability to do each and every one of those tools within our own boundary. I can charge rates to use anything. I could work hard on the Board of Supervisors to talk the rest of them into dedicating a portion of the property tax rate. So I was really trying to hone in on why create a district if I'm going to have to create another elected board, unless we have a regional focus or impact where I can go across my city lines. Why would I do it when I already have that toolbox at my disposal?
Well, let me ask, and this is something we can go into in greater detail and be happy to do that. The rate assessment is, and again, these are dedicated funds that cannot be, that would not be reallocated to any other purpose. And again, the accountability is there as well. But the rate assessment is for a particular service that only can be used for that purpose. So. And there is, anyway, I'm certainly happy to talk to you more about that because there can be some benefit there.
Any other questions or comments from the commission? Donna?
Well, I can just comment on Supervisor Commissioner Bagwell's. We're going to be getting a fixed asset management list pretty soon, as I understand it. And I have a feeling it's going to be many, many pages. And I know that Lori does a wonderful job and creates miracles for us in the parks field as a member of the Board of Supervisors. And it's definitely appreciated, but I don't know if she's going to be able to start even looking at, that list. So I think it is a tool, and maybe having it regional, maybe more effective, maybe more popular, maybe more useful. But if not, I think it would be still a good tool for Carson City, because even though we have two sources of funding for parks already, it's not handling it. And and we're just getting further and further behind. So that's my comment on that. Did you want to hear about the foundation? Okay, I'm on the Parks Recreation Foundation. It's a fairly new organization. It has existed in the past, and then it kind of went into, no man's land or whatever, and then it was revived about a year and a half ago. So we're just getting started. We're just getting organized. We're organizing ourselves. We're trying to figure out what it is, as a foundation we can be doing. But one of the things, of course, we do want to do is we want to try to get more funding as well from various sources. But one of the things maybe we could do, if there was a sense that, people wanted to look at forming this district, I think the foundation would be a perfect place to do the campaign. Only because, our business is to try to solicit interest, membership, interest in parks and that kind of business. And so that's why I was hoping that, we could have this presentation and we can bring it to the foundation as well when the time comes that we actually want to seriously consider something like this. So that's my comment about the foundation.
Thank you, Commissioner Curtis. Let me add also that the Truckee Meadow Parks Foundation is and has been very involved with this measure, and they too are very interested in what the next step might be in Northern Nevada. So I wanted to throw that out to the group as well, that there is another group of citizens like yourself that have a active board in the Truckee Meadows that also are looking at and we're very supportive of this measure.
Julie, thank you very much. I open it now to public comment. Are there any public comments or questions?
Hi, everyone. My name is Jeff Schultz. I basically guess I would be considered one of those affected property owners. And I have a question for you on that one little statement there. It said where it may elect to seek majority approval by affected property owners. Could you elaborate a little bit more on that?
Certainly, the measure, the law, and I'd be happy to cite the section, contemplates that the elected body or bodies, depending upon who moves this forward, can put this on the ballot to have those that are affected by a potential district, to have them vote on the district. There is significant feedback, public noticing, an opportunity for the public to vote to not have this occur, so that is also in the measure. And it also says that they can put it on the ballot. So it was placed in there, which is not in Chapter 318, which this measure came from, but it was placed in there to put that safeguard in there. So it allows for the elected bodies to put this on the ballot, to have them vote on it, to say yes or no.
Thanks. I still have a question about the word may. They may elect. What, I
Yes.
guess, what initiates the need for a majority approval? What does that entail?
Okay, Mr. Schultz, there's two options. The elected bodies can choose to do it, okay? They can choose to put it on the ballot. If they do not choose to put it on the ballot, then they have to go through an arduous process to do public notice, and the public can make it, they actually come out in the public hearing, and they actually have the power to stop it. In other words, they could say, we do not want this, and so therefore do not develop this district, or do not include my property in the district. So that's the option. They can choose to do it, or if they don't, then the elected body that moves forward with the proposed district has to go through a process to allow the public that are in the proposed boundary to vote to say, no, we don't want it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Yes, Mr. Kimbrough.
Mark Kimbrough, citizen. I don't think Julie knows I was going to be here, but I was I gave testimony at the legislature on this bill. And my testimony was being involved with Parks and Recreation since a lot of people were born in this room. So I've got almost 50 years. And in Parks and Recreation, there's this pendulum that swings. Usually it's the Republican that swings down and the Democrats that swings up. So depends upon who's running government at the time. But I've actually, there's a really good example of Washoe County, your neighbor, who was eviscerated in Parks and Recreation. They still have not, they don't even have a Park and Rec department hardly anymore from those losses of funds. So like Commissioner Bagwell says, they can give, but they can take away. The special district ensures those funds will be there for Parks and Rec. And the argument always is when the times are the worst and some people need those types of services the most sometimes. Places to go, programs and things that support the community. So that was what Donna said was very true. So that helps support that. So you don't have this pendulum with Parks and Rec. And this community has picked up a huge amount of new responsibility. in the new bills in Prison Hill and all these things. And Jen's given you this list I just heard, which is really good because it's going to show this enormous amount of work that's going to need to be done. And then the commissioners are going to have to decide, supervisors have to decide how best to support that. So I just wanted to say that and support it. And Roger was there too, the past administrator, and other people I've known for over 40 years. And it was well received, and she does a really excellent job of putting the word out and defining kind of a process that can be confusing to the public. And the biggest point I think that was the best for me was it has to be elected. A group of people aren't going to gather and form this district. It has to be by popular vote. So that ensures that everybody has a chance to participate, whether or not they want Parks and Rec in their life and open space protection and safety. So thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Any other public comments? Okay. Julie, thank you very much.
Thank you again.
Move to the next item. Okay, item 3B, for possible action, review, discussion, and possible recommendation regarding the signage master plan prepared by Design Workshop for the Parks, Recreation, and Open Space Department. Ann, are you going to start?
Thank you. Yes, for the record, Ann Bollinger, Open Space Administrator. I am very proud to finally bring this to the committees. The Open Space Advisory Committee has talked about signage for many, many years, and it's just one of those tasks that just seem to get bumped on down the line. But more recently, since 2015, when Prison Hill, Silver Saddle, and Ambrose were conveyed to Carson City from the BLM, our land acreage instantly doubled, and then therefore we had even a greater need for signage. And so while there was past discussion, it now brought the need to the forefront. And so the Open Space Advisory Committee started or reignited this discussion. They formed subcommittees. Member Evans and Member Masson volunteered to serve on that subcommittee. And then after a few discussions, then as the Parks and Recreation may recall, then we came to you also asking for volunteers. And so in the beginning, Member Evans and Member Long, we were sitting in the evenings at Starbucks talking about what do we need in the sign plan. So it was nice that we had some coffee to keep us warm, because I think it was about a year ago, about the same time, that we were brainstorming those ideas. And then Member Masson went out to our open space advisory, our open space properties, and identified where those needs are, where do we need signs, what do they need to say, and then following all that, then began our charrette process. And Member Evans, and then from Parks and Recreation, Member Cassiopo joined in those greater discussions, along with some members of our audience this evening. Also with me on staff is Greg Berggren. He's our Trails Coordinator. So from the staff perspective, he really took this project and continued down the line. So I'll allow Greg to continue with the background.
Okay, so for the record, Greg Berggren, Trails Coordinator with Carson City Parks, Recreation, and Open Space. Continuing with the discussions that Ann was just talking about, beginning in April of 2017, we collected input from many individuals, including Member Evans, Park staff, Jennifer Budge, Vern Cron, Ann Bollinger, Cheryl Surface with Washoe County Parks, and others. And from that input, we developed a scope of work, which included welcome and identification signs, interpretive and educational signs, vehicular wayfinding signs, off-highway vehicle wayfinding signs, and informational kiosks and know before you go signs. And so using that information, we developed a request for qualifications, which was advertised through an open competitive process. We received 2 proposals, and we had a selection committee, which was made up of Member Evans and Member Long, and a member of the community, Kelly Clark, 3 members of park staff, which included Vern Cron and Bollinger and myself. And the selection committee, through that process, we selected Design Workshop as our consultant to work on and develop a design for us. We started with, in August with an all-day tour of parks and our open space facilities and our trails, and you'll see in a few moments the results of that tour and what we found out there. Following that tour, our consultant conducted a stakeholder charrette, which was attended by 18 stakeholders, which they represented various organizations, including the Open Space Advisory Committee, the Parks and Recreation Commission, Carson City Parks and Recreation Open Space Department, Carson City Public Works, the Nevada State Parks, Muscle Powered, Carson City Culture and Tourism Authority, the Pine Nut Mountains Trails Association, Eagle Valley Trails Association, the Carson Water Subconservancy District, and we also invited the U.S. Forest Service, the BLM, and the Bureau of Indian Affairs. I'll let Design Workshop talk more about the charrette, but basically 3 themes were presented. We had brainstorming sessions, and participants conducted a survey. Based on the results of that charrette, the consultant further refined their designs, and through several meetings with park staff, either in person or through email and phone conversations, we kept refining the designs. Through that process, we were able to get a lot of the groups within parks involved, including maintenance personnel. So what we have now is more or less not quite the final design, but we're getting close, and so I'm really happy this evening to introduce Ben Fish and Grace Larson with Design Workshop to present what they've got.
Thanks, Greg. Move the microphone. So, yeah, I'm Ben Fish, landscape architect with Design Workshop, and we were the consultant that worked on this, the sign package that we're going to walk you through right now. To my left is Grace Larson, who is the lead designer on the project, and I served as the project manager. To go back just a couple steps, we did have the charrette, or the stakeholder meeting, and we have those, we can show those examples, but we didn't put it in the presentation here because we're going to show you the final preferred option. But some of the outcomes of that is we showed 3 options, and one of them was rural and rustic, another one was refined parks and recreation, and then another one was history in motion. And when we showed those options, we did a survey at the end, and consistency was the #1 theme that came out from the stakeholder group. Consistency between the town and the open space, or the city, the open space, and the parks, and then durability of the elements, the aesthetics and the timelessness of the design, the constructability. And then lower on the list was regional, if you were to do something that was more east side versus west side, and then interface and cohesiveness with other agencies. So with those priorities, we did have that in the signage package, and we'll walk you through right here. And this is a PDF of the draft final preferred signage package. So I think you have all of this in your package, and we'll be looking for comments on this. And again, the project purpose is this document is a guide for all future exterior signs in the city's parks, trails, and open space. The signage master plan will include graphic design standards for the variety of sign types necessary for various conditions throughout the city. The signs are located at or on public outdoor facilities, and they perform an integral function of conveying sight and its visitors. They can identify and interpret features within a park, open space, and along the trail, and provide users with a sense of knowledge and safety. Signs also identify location as Carson City site. This is one of the most important things that evokes the images of Carson's rich history, well-maintained facilities, and excellent outdoor recreation. So there's kind of a sense of pride that's going to come with this signage package, and we'll walk you through what most of you are aware of right now, of a pretty inconsistent signage family that's on the parks and open spaces right now. On this slide, some of the branding and wayfinding principles was simplicity. So you'll see the signs are fairly simple. There's not a lot of wording on them, not a lot of kind of busy patterns and textures and colors. So with that also is clarity, quality. So there'll be a quality and the durability of the signs, the aesthetics of them, the consistency again, and how that does work with different partner agencies such as the Forest Service or BLM, and then the placement of the signs that we've worked through. Also on this page is some reference documents that we're referencing and other partner agencies and land managers that would have logos and branding on the same signs as Carson City. So this is the existing sign inventory. As much as many of you are aware that there's different, even within parks, there's different typefaces, layouts, sizes, color schemes, and signage materials. The only consistency is the entry signs, as you see on this page. And then as you jump into the parks, there's really a broad range of inconsistent sign designs and families. And even, some are posted on chain link fences, some are on post. And, we're trying to clean all that up in this package.
So the signage family that we developed was sort of a mix of two of the themes we presented in the charrette meeting with the stakeholders. The signs have a simple, clean aesthetic, but also draw from Carson City's rich history and surrounding natural open space. So the colors are sort of earthy. We use fireweed red, which is the historic color associated with Silver Saddle Ranch, as sort of a main color in the color palette, as well as colors that sort of draw on the natural open space with pines and sagebrush and sort of earthy tones. We have an expanded color palette included on the page as well. So if the park district ever wants to create additional marketing or expand the signage package, there's sort of a family of colors that we've developed that would sort of maintain this theme we've come up with. We've selected the typeface called sans serif to be used in both regular and bold fonts. And we've created a pretty simple text hierarchy that would have a heading, subheading, and body text that would obviously change with the size of the sign or the material that is being printed on, but consistent text hierarchy throughout all of the signs.
And some of the inspirational imagery that we have up here, this one is a project we worked on in Southern Nevada, in Las Vegas Valley. And it had a silhouette theme in the park maps and gabion. And the use of gabion came out pretty strongly in the stakeholder. There was a few people in the stakeholders that thought that would be a interesting material to use and a nice one. And we did explore that and with park staff, and it did fall off the options you'll see. So if there are any folks from the stakeholder group, we did consider it, but it fell off for mostly maintenance and some other issues on there. Another sign here that we took inspiration from was a project that we worked on up in South Lake Tahoe, the Bijou Bike Park. And this sign it's an entry sign. You'll see our next series of slides of our kiosk signs, but it's modular. And behind all of you back here, we printed a full-size mock-up of this. And if you can, I'll use the red dot, or I can walk over there. But each one of these would be its own component, and they would be on a mesh background so that they're interchangeable. You can change the trail map, you can change some of the usage and the notifications and that sort of thing. But it's on a mesh background, and each panel will be printed independently and then put up there. And the white space up here too would be cut off, so that would be a silhouette that we would have. And some of the exact materials, so like these panels, they could be aluminum. We have another option up here of a resin plaque, or they can be plastic as well. The downtown Carson ones are a plastic panel with sticker on them, which surprisingly works very well. So we are exploring different materials. And those will be weighted based on costs and availability and replacement.
All right, so you can see our general design for the signs, and we've developed two main different color themes to be used with the urban parks versus the open space parks. And the idea of this would be the design of the sign is consistent, but the color themes sort of set and create expectations for users so they can get an idea of what recreation activities to expect at each of these parks depending on sort of the theme established by the signs. We also created a template that we shared with the Parks Recreation Open Space District to be used for seasonal notices. So this is also consistent with our design with the silhouette of the mountains, and that can be updated and posted on the kiosk signs with seasonal notices or other announcements to stay consistent with our design. And we also developed a theme to go with the community center aquatic facility that is a slightly different take on colors that kind of fits the theme of those facilities as well. So we propose to retrofit the existing monument signs by simply painting the lettering from blue to either green or fireweed red to match with the themes that we've developed in the signage package. And there's two options, either to just do a simple band of color on the bottom above the foundation or to paint the entire foundation. So fairly simple updates to leave the existing monument signs but have them still match with the proposed signage package and provide an update to those signs.
And then the next in the sign family, like I was pointing out behind you all there, is the kiosk signs. And these will be modular. They do have the flexibility to reprint panels as maps change and uses change or rules and regs change and that sort of thing. You'll notice a lot of these, we're trying to identify really clearly what you can do in the park. So really being positive with these and identifying to the user what you can do here. Certainly there will be some cases where you have the no symbol as well, but again, trying to tell people what they can do. This is exactly what they would look like. So we have a 6x6 post, probably a metal post on these. You could also go the wood. We're using the black iron banding. Sorry, it's hard to see with the lights on here, but if there are enlargements of these, that would then attach to the metal frame, and then each panel would be with security bolts affixed on. And this is the front and the back, so you have the front as you'd walk in and the back, and a display case for seasonal notices. And a few other options here that start to show the option for a roof and invoking some of the Forest Service, BLM, and state parks lands, and then also multi-panel kiosks. You can do a 3-panel, 2-panel, another 3rd panel as well.
So we developed a couple different signs that could be used in the park interiors, typically along paths or trails. We developed a few different sizes for displaying the information. First, there's the directional sign, and as you can see, we have kept the design consistent with the silhouette of the mountains, but in this case, it's executed as just with a color block rather than the actual silhouette cutout. So there's flexibility in the design moving forward if you choose to keep it a rectangular shape or to actually cut the silhouette out into the sign. But these signs would include information about where amenities are located in the park, what direction they're in, maybe a small park map, as well as a couple different sizes for interpretive panels to expand upon information being shared with visitors about what they're seeing at the park and what they're engaging with. So, like I said, there's several different sizes that could be used throughout the park depending on the space availability. With the directional sign, it could be posted on the center of, mounted on the center of the post or side mounted depending on space availability, but also utilizing the black banded strap to attach it to the post. And then there's a large and a small option for interpretive signs. And finally, we have a set of options for trail marker signs. These could be used in more urban parks, but typically you'd see them in the open space along the trails. That we've developed 2 different sizes, either a 6x6 inch or a 4x4 inch, and several color options. The first set matching the color options established earlier on in the signage package, and additional color options that we were looking at that could utilize colors that had been used in existing trail maps, like the Prison Hill Trail map, the trails are shown in different colors, like blue and yellow and red. So these color options could use the colors used to markate those trails, and then there's a visual connection for the user knowing they want to go to the blue trail next or whatnot. So these would be used to mark intersections or upcoming trails along the trail system.
I think now we'll open it for questions. I'm looking to Greg and Ann and Jennifer.
You're ready.
Sorry. Yeah.
You're ready for questions?
We are ready for questions.
Okay, I'd like to ask staff, do you have anything to add?
Nothing to add from staff
Okay,
at this time.
I'll ask for comments from open space. I will preface that by saying it's great to be to this point. We've been anxious for signs for a long time, and I appreciate the thought and some of the consistency that we see. With that, do we have comments from Open Space Committee members or questions? Margie, you and Jerry were directly involved in some of the signage work. Do you guys have anything to add at this point, or any questions?
I'd like to bring something up in that we talked about at great length, and I believe that all of us on the Open Space Committee believe that we are caring for a pretty special jewel in northern Nevada in the open space properties that we've been able to acquire thanks to all of you, and Bruce, you're one of those that's worked the hardest and longest. And I appreciate the fact that this design allows us to have a little bit different note depicting either the red for the open space and the green for the more manicured parks. You know, I appreciate that. I think I'm excited to see these some iterations very similar to these going up, and being proud of the work that we have done and the properties on both sides that we are sharing. The parks properties, the open space properties, our great rec centers. It's pretty exciting to see this come together and see something getting tangible, getting able to hold on to.
Any comments, Jerry?
My concerns are still from the very beginning are the location of these signs. They're beautiful and the colors are great and everything. And I like the fact that they're easy to read and understand, but where they are placed is going to be the big issue with open space. Not for parks, because parks generally have a parking lot. People kind of wander down paths and they're there, but open space is totally different. And so from the beginning, I've always said the reason I did my survey was to locate locations for these signs. Now, I don't see the city coming up with 12 of them for Prison Hill. Maybe I'm misunderstanding, but I think Prison Hill needs 5 or 6 that I know of, just from the different entrances into that area. And if you put it in a central area, by the time the people get there, they've already broken half the rules. And so those are my concerns. They've been that way from the very beginning. So I'd like to see how that progresses down the road.
Okay, thank you, Jerry, and I think a really good point. Speaking of implementation, do we have any in-house capability within the city to create signs? Do we have a sign shop, or is there any, I realize we've gone outside for a lot of these, but we would be going outside for, okay. I would suggest in terms of just the color. I do like the colors, and I like open space having a color and parks having a color. On the monument signs, I really don't think painting the entire base is a good idea. If you look at the monument signs now, you can tell what size bird has perched on them. And I'm thinking the brown band along the base of the signs, as opposed to the entire base being painted, would give you the distinctive nature and not really create a problem that I think is going to be more of a maintenance or relatively short-term ugliness for your eye to catch on that. With that, the obvious question, and, we got Parks and Rec people here that are going to comment too, but while I'm speaking, I'll mention that clearly we're going to want to talk about, okay, where do we go from here and what kind of a schedule can we place to keep this moving as part of what's important from an open space perspective. So with that, Leanne, why don't you see what questions or comments your folks have, and we'll go to public comment.
All right, thank you, Bruce. All right, any questions or comments? Commissioner Curtis?
Yeah, it was kind of interesting. Yesterday, we had an open house at the Wangamia House in Mills Park. There were 2 people there at least that were new to the area, could not find the park because the sign for Mills Park is flat and parallel to Solomon Street. And if you're driving down and you're trying to find which driveway between the apartments and the park, you're supposed to turn in to get to the park, you can't see it because the sign is back here. There needs to be a way, and then you're slowing down on Solomon to try to find it, and you got people coming up behind you, driving you crazy. And as many times as I've been there, I still have to slow down, make sure I'm getting in the right driveway. So I didn't see anything here that tells me there's something that's going to be coming out this way as you're driving along so you can see where Mills Park is. So it's just a comment that I have. And the second thing is, if we're going to be changing all these signs, do we have a funding mechanism for this?
Any other questions
Somebody
or
gonna
comments?
answer?
Would you like me?
We have a whole list of questions. Are you going to do it?
Well, the boss just said we have a whole list of questions to try to answer, but I'll try to,
all of yours.
but I'll try to answer the most recent question is the funding source. I think in a lot of these cases, as there are grant projects, we can build in this cost to the grants to change out the signage. So that would probably be the most significant funding source.
I'm sorry, is there an answer to my problem finding Mills Park and new people in town trying to get into it because the sign is not visible?
Thank you, Commissioner Curtis. Jennifer Budge, Parks and Recreation Director. I've been noting everybody's comments, so I figure we'll probably get to all of the answers. But part of this discussion, we really talked about wayfinding within the city, and a lot of that has to do with city street signs, not necessarily in the park. BLM signage, Forest Service signage, and also working with NDOT. Like if you're going to Centennial Park, those brown signs you have with white letters, they're a certain standard type sign, and it's really looking at each park facility, each open space, and where we need to make sure we're directing traffic, especially from the freeways. If people are going to tournaments and we're trying to bring people in from out areas that maybe have never been to Carson City, we need to make sure that wayfinding throughout the city is consistent. So that has been part of our discussion, and we recognize that there's some great signage out there to some of our facilities, and others it's really difficult. Pete Livermore Sports Complex is another great example. It says Edmonds, it's a white sign, it's hidden behind a tree, it's right next to someone's home. For me, every time I go out there, I have to really think about where I'm going to turn. So I fully recognize that we have those issues, and we have to start within our facilities and then definitely have that as part of the discussion, and so people can find the parks as well. So we'll hopefully put together a list and work with staff, work with our consultants on those areas where we can work with our partners like BLM, Forest Service, NDOT, and the city to get signs in the right areas to be able to find those locations.
That answer your question?
Yeah, I hope so.
Commissioner Long?
Yeah, I guess I'll speak for a little bit as well, but I know about a year ago is when we kind of started looking over this with Ann and Margie and myself. And I think that was one of the big kind of questions and kind of hang-ups at the beginning was there's obviously, clearly it's come up today, that there's a lot of need and kind of room for improvement as far as signage. But I think a lot of it really starts with like coming up with a consistent kind of approach rather than the hodgepodge that's been happening that's created part of the confusion that exists. So I think once we decide on and have a standard, then implementing that, and that's still kind of part of my question as well, like over time, it's going to have to be implemented. It's not going to happen overnight. Certain parks, certain open spaces, whatever it may be, are going to have to be picked, and those are going to be targeted, and then over time, everything will kind of be brought up to that standard. So I think it's just important to recognize we're at the very beginning, and we are just now setting the standard. And so just because we've not defined a standard doesn't mean that now finding Silver Sino Ranch is going to be easy to see. So it's going to be, I know I was very anxious, and thank you for Ann and Greg. You guys did an awesome job. I know from where we were a year ago, I'm really pleased with where we're at now, getting going. And Greg, once you got on board, we cut him loose and he took off. So that's awesome. Thank you.
Nothing? All right, Bruce, back to you.
Okay. I think we've emphasized that location is important, both from open space and parks. I do think we're going to have to implement this over time, but, when I look at the monument signs, those are pretty straightforward to make adjustments to fairly easily and probably within our staff capabilities. So we can really begin to introduce this. The other thing probably is setting priorities on where we have the most concern and really focusing on establishing signage in those areas. Jerry's pointed out, some of the areas in the past that really need some direction. I think it's great to have a common theme. I really appreciate the work that Design Workshop has done, and I'm sure there'll be some implementation questions as we move forward, but I think we can really begin to start implementing this fairly quickly, and it wouldn't be a bad idea to put together some sort of a newspaper release in conjunction maybe with getting some of these monument signs, because they're out there for quite a number of properties, and it would be fairly easy to get some of those done to get people's eye in the community to see those and recognize the new color themes. So with that, I would open it to public comment. Are there any questions, comments from the public? Thoughts, suggestions, ideas? Okay. Nancy.
Hi, my name is Nancy Santos. I'm with Friends of Silver Saddle Ranch, and I just wanted to say I'm impressed with what I've seen tonight and look forward to seeing these signs out there. I am concerned, as Jerry, with locations, especially at the ranch, because it's got its historic nature and stuff, but I'm really impressed with what's been shown tonight.
Great. Thank you, Nancy. Any other public comments? Yes.
I'll just try to be brief quickly. I'm involved with Eagle Valley Disc Golf Club.
Can you introduce yourself, please? State your name for the record.
Yes, Michael Plansky. I have a background in landscape architecture. I'm soon to be licensed. I'm working with Eagle Valley Disc Golf Club, which has land water conservation grant for the first phase of a disc golf complex off Flint Road, and we're planning to get that first phase open this spring. And all along, part of our plan is to do interpretive elements and wayfinding and signage, and it seems very timely that this scheme could work very well with the disc golf course. And I read the Trails Master Plan, or the draft Trails and Open Space plan, and heard the comment earlier about where signage is appropriate, and just like to make the comment that disc golf is a unique activity where you have 18 T signs where you have people's captured attention, and we plan to work with appropriate agencies and organizations that have expertise in whether it be geology, culture. There's a lot of long views of peaks from the disc golf course, and there's also pinyon juniper woodland, a lot of things to interpret. So in short, there's an opportunity 18 times to interpret something. We've done a study all summer, a professional study that shows that disc golfers come to this region. And if you're not all familiar with disc golf, maybe you're familiar with frisbee golf, but it's becoming more of a mainstream sport and growing in popularity. It's kind of a geotourism opportunity where people can come and learn about the region, and also for place-based education type programs to introduce children to the sport. So there's a lot of opportunity, I think, to work with this signage plan and have it be consistent. And I hope we can cooperate on that as we plan the course over this winter.
Thank you. I think it would be really valuable if your signage reflected our new sign considerations. So if you can be sure and work closely with staff to help, you could be the first facility, if you will, to really embody all the new signage. We'll be putting them up piece by piece in other places, but that would be great. And I think disc golf is becoming more recognized, so it's going to be interesting. So thank you very much for your comments.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Any other public comments?
Hello, I'm Laura Richards, and I just had, this is an amazing overview, and it's a really good step forward, I think, on the sign process, but I also thought that it would be very easy to, develop your brochures for each park and open space very similar to a layout here, so there's consistency in your different brochures for both open space and parks, and the maps, so that, down the road, everything would be consistent, and the public would have both the signage and the informational brochures that are very similar.
Thank you. Any other public comments?
Actually, I'll just respond to that quick, because...
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry. We have talked to staff about that, and what you see here for the design, it is, it's a set of parameters that can be used, so it's not like you're only stuck to these 5 signs. So if there is the possibility to use it in brochures or vehicular wayfinding, to Donna's point, and others. So.
Yes, Jennifer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Jennifer Budge. Laura was great. She just took the words out of my mouth. But this is something that we've talked about as staff that we want to bleed into our website and our promotional materials and our activity guide, and using that consistent font and color schemes and everything through even reports eventually. So anything we produce would have this look. We really want one consistent professional look that is user-friendly and easy to understand. And I think what they've brought forward really speaks to that, and it's something that we can very simply use for temporary signs. When we have the sheep grazing project and we need to close trails, we can have a template that we print out that looks just like that, and we can talk about what messages we need to give to the public. Or the Adopt a Park program and Adopt a Open Space, Adopt a Trail, all those visions that we have for that type of signage can easily be put into this. So another thing I wanted to point out, and the reason I brought up this slide, is it really shows that band across the bottom, and that's another great way to acknowledge funding that we've discussed. So for those sites that had Question 18 funding or Land and Water Conservation Fund or things like of that nature, we can really highlight it maybe through that bottom band and acknowledge that as part of that education piece that I know that you all want forward, and something that Donna's brought forward to the staff about having on the website, and just part of that continual education message. Yes, you did vote for this. We did spend your tax dollars where we said we would, and we're going to help educate the public on where we've spent those dollars. So that's another option for flexibility within the signage that I just wanted to point out.
Thank you. Any other public comments? Any comments from, yes, Donna?
Yeah, I was just thinking, in order to get this funded and move it forward, we could have an open adopt a sign and get public and businesses to pay, to purchase signs for us. That we might be able to get quite a bit that way.
Thank you, and I think that's a great suggestion, and we do have budgets coming up. We want to start, we'll work with Design Workshop, getting cost estimates on this based on materials, and start to build that into our budget and how we can prioritize where we need signs. I can think of, probably 10 just off the top of a hat that really need to be consolidated and have 20 signs turn into one really nice professional sign. Riverview Park is a great example. That, I call it a sign cemetery. There's like 20 different signs, and they all say different things in different fonts and different styles. So that would be a great location as an example to start from. And we can build that into our budget. We can build it into grants. We can work with sponsors. I think there's a lot of options and opportunities.
Just one other thing to remember. I think it's really important on places like, especially the freeway multi-use path and the Mexican Ditch Trail. I got the city to put in the little signs that tell you what street you're crossing when you cross a street, and it's nice when you're on a trail, you come to a street, and if there's not something there, you have no idea what that street is you're crossing, and it's really important to keep so that you know where you are.
Along this similar vein, I would hope you could attempt to identify things that we could get volunteers to take on. I mean, I just look at the stripe that you want to paint. I think, there are Kiwanis clubs, there's Muscle Power, there's various groups that have, adopted parks or done one-time efforts in Carson City. So if you identify those sorts of things, I think there are people that would volunteer to help you with that.
Yes,
Also, at the high school, there's a National Honor Society. If you ever need a small army of volunteers, I can help out with that.
Thank you, Maritza. Can they color between the lines? Good point. Thank you.
Mr. Chair?
Yeah.
I was going to add something similar. There's senior projects. I don't know what facilities are available currently at the high school or middle schools. That, once you have a model or a mold or whatever, maybe we could get some help building some of these signs and at WNC as well.
I was going to comment, I think it would be a great Eagle Scout project. We have a lot of Eagle Scouts come before the Parks and Rec Commission with different projects. And I know Vern sometimes has to find a project for them, and I think that working on the monument signs would be a good start.
Yeah, one final comment. We have a lot of ideas here on getting started, but I'm confident that within our existing open space budget, without waiting until next year, we could do a couple of really good professional examples just to get them out there, see how they go in installation, see how they are for initial maintenance, and really set the tone. So I'm hopeful that we certainly are going to want to think about this at budget time, but I don't want us to wait till budget time in order to get the process started. Okay, this is agendized as an action item. Is there any further public comment? Iris, do we need two motions on this, one from Open Space and one from Parks and Rec?
Yes.
Thank you. You don't need to elaborate. Okay, from Open Space perspective, do we have a motion?
I move to approve the signage master plan for the Carson City Parks, Recreation, and Open Space Department.
I'll second.
Okay, voting now from Open Space. Any further discussions? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay.
All right. Do I hear a motion from Parks and Rec? Commissioner Curtis?
Yes, I move to approve the signage master plan for the Carson City Parks and Recreation and Open Space Department.
I'll give it a second with a clarification that the signs be with the single line, not the full base. There was an option in there, so just so that we're clear, we like the one that's not the full painting on the base. So just as a point of clarification. So second.
Okay. Any comment? All those in favor? Aye. The motion carries for Parks and Rec.
Great. Did anybody from open space perspective have any heartburn over Commissioner Bagwell's comment about the band there? Are we all consistent even though it wasn't in the motion? Great. Thanks, Lori. Okay, item 3C, review, discussion, and possible recommendation to the Planning Commission concerning an amendment to the Unified Pathways Master Plan, incorporating non-motorized trail system additions to the plan's map, Chapter 9, off-street trails, Chapter 11, implementation, and Appendix 13.2, public comments. Ann, is that you, or Vern? You've changed.
Yeah, just for the record, Vern Cron, I'm the senior planner for Carson City Parks. And with me tonight, we're going to tag team this. Again, to my left is Greg Berggren. He is our trails coordinator, and Greg has done yeoman's work on trying to piece this amendment together, so he deserves a lot of credit up front. So with that, let us get down to business. For those of you who may not know, the Unified Pathway Master Plan was adopted in 2006 by the Board of Supervisors and was revised in 2007 with the addition of the aquatic trail plan that was developed during that following year. The plan itself has been an excellent document for staff to use over the course of almost 10 years now to help guide the development of the multi-use path systems in town, as well as the on-street bike lanes and shared use facilities that you see. But this plan did not specifically address non-motorized single-track trails. So that was something that we're here to talk about this evening and amending that plan to fill that hole. Since 2007, the demand for non-motorized single-track trail has been increasing. We're starting to get a lot of requests for our trail system plans, as well as for expanding of our trail system that we currently have, specifically up on the more open space properties that we have in the city. The Cultural and Tourism Authority recognizes the importance of the trails to the community, and I think the community has also been recognizing that with the off-road, with the Carson City off-road series that has been here in Carson City the past couple of years. I think this has really highlighted not only our trail system, not only both regionally but also nationally, as well as just bringing that to the conscious of our community. Sometimes it's just you just don't know what you have until you actually get out there and see it. And I think some of these events have really highlighted that and the need for this plan as well. As a result, with the Eagle Valley Trail Committee, they spent 2 years, and it's to me it's such a remarkable labor of love to have gone 2 years putting together the necessary documentation, site analysis, all the different work that they did that put into their document, the Community Trail Inventory Review, Evaluation, and User Assessment Report. As both committees will remember that on May 2nd, the Eagle Valley Trail Committee brought their report forward. They gave a presentation here. And it's a very comprehensive document. It provides Carson City, and it was provided at no cost to Carson City. So we're very pleased to have had that effort by these folks. What's also interesting to know is that some of the communities around Carson City are now paying to have the same type of document and analysis done that we got for free. So we're real excited to have been involved in this partnership. The outcome of the presentation from the Eagle Valley Trail Committee was a motion from both Parks and Rec and from Open Space. And I'll just read that. To direct staff to work with the Eagle Valley Trail Committee to prepare draft documents for future consideration with the intent to amend the Unified Pathways Master Plan to expand the city's non-motorized trail system based on the Eagle Valley Trail Committee's Community Trail Inventory Report Evaluation and User Need Assessment Report. And that's what we're here tonight to do, is we're bringing back the amendments that we're proposing for amendment to the Unified Pathways Master Plan based on what came out of this report. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Greg. Like I mentioned earlier, Greg did a yeoman's work here of working with the Eagle Valley Trail Committee to make these assessments. Also, I want to give a kind of an acknowledgement to Hope Sullivan. She has been helping us work through the process. So if the commission approves these amendments tonight, we will then be taking it forward, and Hope has been working with us with that in mind, that we get to the Planning Commission and then eventually to the Board of Supervisors. So Hope has been providing us input along the way. So anyway, Greg, I'm going to let you take it from here.
Okay, thank you, Vern. So I am excited to walk you through the amendments that we have proposed. First of all, staff conducted a detailed review of the existing plan so that we could determine what we needed in order to fulfill the directives of the motion from May. And we worked in collaboration with members of the EVCT to come up with these amendments. And so we'll start with the first slide. Okay, so on page 9-4, which is in Chapter 9, Off-Street Trails, we added a bullet point to subsection 9.2.1, and that is a trail difficulty rating system. We felt that, and as did the Eagle Valley Trail Committee, that having a rating system will help to help them to make informed decisions and encourage visitors to use trails that match their skill level. The recommended system is one that was developed by the International Mountain Bike Association, or IMBA, and it's not a system that would be exclusively used by mountain bikers. It's a system that is internationally recognized by probably a whole lot of people, and it's applicable to all users, including trail hikers, runners, and equestrians. Okay, so then we moved on to Chapter 11. Oh, yeah.
Would you take questions as we go along, or do you want to?
Chairman, would you like me to take questions as we go along? Would that be okay?
Certainly.
Okay, sure.
Okay, on your 9-point whatever, trail difficulty system, is there a way to either put that graphic into the plan or do an appendix or something that kind of explains what it is? The idea is, okay, you say you're going to have a trail difficulty rating system, but what is it? And is there a way that we can kind of show in this document what it is?
Sure, yeah, that's a good question, and we referenced it. We referenced their system in here, and we could address that and look at putting the graphic into the plan as well. Okay, so then we looked at Chapter 11, Implementation, and if you look at page 11-4, we added subsection 11.1.5. I'm sorry, wait.
No, you're doing fine.
Yeah, okay.
You're doing fine.
All right, I thought I was in the wrong place.
No, you're doing great.
11.1.5, which is increasing off-street single-track opportunities. And in paragraph 1, we gave a brief history of the Eagle Valley Trail Committee and how they came about to producing their report. We felt that was important for context. In paragraph 2, we make recommendations for trail design and construction. And the U.S. Forest Service Trail Construction and Maintenance Handbook is kind of the standard for trail design, but it's not an end-all, and they recognize that and address that in their book. So the basic fundamentals, principles of sustainable trail construction and design are carried through in a number of references. But when it comes to making trails that are fun and interesting and attractive to a variety of user groups, we want to make sure that we have all the tools available to us. And so we referenced a number of different books that can be utilized for the design and construction of trails. And then the other part of that subsection 11.1.5, of course, is most importantly, we listed the recommendations for single track trails that were recommended in the Eagle Valley Trail Committee report. And the opportunities are prioritized as Tier 1 and Tier 2, and that's based on their scoring criteria, which included consideration of public input. Any questions on that section?
So may I just clarify, in your first tier trail projects, are those also in order? So is 1 the highest priority, 2 is the next, or is it just first tier versus second tier?
It's just first tier versus second tier, and to be clear, there's no way that we're going to be able to implement all of this at one time, and a lot of it will be prioritized as opportunities present themselves. So these are the recommendations, and going forward over a period of time, we'll be working to achieve these goals, and kind of based on the Tier 1 and Tier 2 in general.
May I just do a follow-up? So all I want to make sure is that sometimes there could be an opportunity to go and pick off a second tier before I can do a first tier. So I don't mind it, just so that it's clear, it's a goal for us to search, but it doesn't mean that the Board of Supervisors or somebody might not come in and say, I'm not going to do anything on Tier 1, I'm going to go pick up Tier 2, because I have a funding source or a little bit of, well, as Donna will always say, I've got it in my mind, I got $4,000, I'm going to go get this.
Absolutely.
So, okay.
If
I
an
just wanted to
opportunity
make sure.
presents itself,
That's how I do
we'll follow it.
Okay.
And like I said, the tiers were based a lot on public input, and so the Tier 1 opportunities are kind of maybe had more input from public comment than the Tier 2, but that doesn't mean that we're going to implement Tier 1 first and then move on to Tier 2. Like I said, as opportunities present themselves, we will do them.
Comment then, is there a reason that we have to have the tiers instead of just saying these are projects that have been identified?
We took the recommendations out of the Eagle Valley Trails Committee report, and that's how we put them into the policy, or into the amendment.
One of the other things, too, is that if you look at the other page or the other chapters within the Unified Pathways Plan that identify other projects, we went with a similar format, Tier 1, Tier 2. So we were trying to stay consistent with the format that already exists within the document as well.
Sure, go ahead.
Thanks. Sorry for my confusion or whatever, which happens. But I was involved, of course, in the original plan. And my understanding is that these trails were going to be multi-use, non-motorized, single track, whatever. So what we're trying to do now is we're trying to accommodate more bike users or mountain bike users or
OHVs maybe, off-highway vehicles.
Multi-use, it's multi-use.
But I thought we already had that. The reason why, I'm asking is because, there may be a lot of trails right now that people walk on, and maybe they're not used so much by people on mountain bikes or equestrians even. So how is that going to work in terms of, my peaceful walk and on your left, with the bell coming up after me? Is this going to encourage more of that, or I guess like I say, I'm a little confused about what we're trying to do here.
Well, I think in general, we're trying to accommodate a variety of users. And there are some trails that would probably lend themselves more to hikers and runners. There are some trails that may lend themselves more to equestrian use, and then there are some trails that may lend themselves more to mountain bike use. And in some cases, trails will be designed so that there could be some features for mountain bikers so that a hiker may take one path and a mountain biker may take another path so that they can increase their enjoyment on the trail.
Yeah, and I'd like to add, Donna, when we talk about the multi-use trails, we're talking mostly on the urban floor, whereas when you get up into the hills and the foothills, you're talking about a topography issue. So you're ending up with smaller trails, less impact to the environment. And again, we're still looking at multi-use, as Greg mentioned, but you're dealing with a different aspect of this trail plan. And so this is new to the trail plan. The trail plan did not, or the pathways plan originally did not address these single track trails that were up in the foothills, and that's what we're trying to do. We saw it as a way to close the hole that as more and more people have been coming forward with the idea of connecting our trail systems, doing those missing links that we've talked about on the urban floor. Now we're trying to create a plan to create those missing links in the foothills and in the mountains for our single track trail system that we have in the community. Does that help? Okay.
Go ahead, Greg.
Okay, so moving on to the next slide, we're continuing on in Chapter 11, page 11-8, and we added an amendment to subsection 11.2.5 to explain that volunteer organizations and groups are a critical component of implementation. As you said before, we can't do this without all the wonderful volunteers that we have in Carson City. And then we deleted the second subsection, 11.2.6. If you look in your plan, there is on page 11-8, there is an 11.2.6 which talks about the Washoe tribe. And then if you turn the page, there's another 11.2.6 which talks about the Tahoe Rim Trail Association. So that was a typo that was in the original document, that we opted to delete that second 11.2.6 because reference to the Tahoe Rim Trail Association was made redundant with the corrections that we made, or the changes that we made in subsection 11.2.5. Okay, and then we also added subsection 11.2.10 to explain the importance of partnering with adjacent counties to accomplish regional connectivity. One of the important aspects of our plan is we want our trails to be able to connect, for example, to Douglas County, to Lyon County, and to Washoe County. So questions on
Let's stay there. Sorry.
that slide?
Go ahead. Keep going.
Okay. Okay, so then in Chapter 12, and this is probably one of the most important sections of our amendment, we updated the UPMP map to include an updated land ownership on the base, and then to include all of the desired locations for single-track trails. The solid orange lines indicate existing legal trails, and the dashed orange lines indicate proposed single-track trails. We did not address the urban trails, so the changes are only on to the single-track trails which are indicated in orange.
Greg, on those maps, the legend doesn't tell you what the different colored trails are.
Well, if you get your magnifying glass, I know it's difficult to see on this at this scale. Down below there on the bottom, that and I know I don't even think I can see it, but it does address the those colors.
Yes.
I have a question too that I've asked a couple times. What's the difference between the two greens? They're both off-street. I can't get it big enough right at the moment. They say the same thing, but they're two different colors.
Yeah, yeah, to be honest, I think that's an error because one of them doesn't have the wide path next to it. So we'll double check that. That's a good catch, Donna. I think it is. If you go back to the original plan, and we will double check this, one of them has to do with a wide shoulder path, the other one does not.
Okay.
But in following up on what Greg said, I'm seeing a red line, I'm seeing a red line with white on either side of it, which I don't see in the legend. I'm seeing dashed as opposed to solid. It seems to me that the trail legend is pretty critical for a user to figure out what kind of trail it is, and it ought to be a little more obvious and maybe a little bit more distinctive. You know, you've got yellow that are urban, you've got, I guess, blue that are urban, but you have, it may be that it comes together more easily, but I think you're going to find a lot of people excerpt these maps and look at them by themselves, and it might be worth trying to see if there's a way to clarify the legend a little bit, or make it a 2-page or something.
Yeah, we will double check on the legends, but Bruce, your point is a very good one. Just for clarification, when you look at the red lines, if it has a white shadow next to it, that's motorized. I believe, if I recall right, that's a motorized section. And then the other ones without the white shadow is more of just a more of a non-motorized track. So a double track. So we'll go ahead as we refine this and head toward the Planning Commission. We'll go ahead and see if we can refine those. Not only refine the legend a little bit more, but also the cross sections at the bottom that identify the different path types.
Okay, go ahead. We've interrupted you several times.
No, that's great. Mr. Chairman, thank you. Those are excellent comments that we need.
Jeremy has a question or comment too.
One thing that I had an eye out for the symbology that I had a problem with is we got so much single track in the mountains that has a lot of switchbacks. And one problem I have is with the dashed lines. You get, it just becomes a pile of spaghetti in some of these switchback areas. So one trick that I would suggest is just to shorten up the dashes. The dash is obviously one trick that we need to use for symbology to call the difference between existing and proposed, which I think is great. But yeah, I would just shorten up those dashes, and then like others have commented, yeah, the one piece of symbology that's missing is calling out what the motorized use is, that white line that's missing. What I would actually do is move the entire legend to the title block on the bottom and include that with all of the solid and dashed lines so that the legend is in one spot. I actually don't even see the need to have all of the cross sections for these maps. That could actually be something outside of these maps. I see it as important, but it's also, there's just so much going on. A map like this is extremely difficult to make, and I think Eric Ingbar at Noman is the guy responsible for putting these together. I think he did a really good job, but these maps take a long time to perfect. So those are just my suggestions.
Yeah, I think those are very good suggestions, and perhaps we could talk about those and implement some of that.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions on? Okay. So then the next amendment is to the appendix, and in that case we simply added subsection 13.2.5, which included all of the public comments from the trail workshops and the online survey that was conducted by the Eagle Valley Trails Committee. And that was we just transferred their information directly into the appendix.
Sure, go ahead.
Well, you know, we had previous comments on the plan before we added all of these new ones in green. And I'm wondering, what are we doing with them? I mean, they're great comments, a lot of them, and is there a plan to kind of go through and say, okay, let's group these together? And, well, I guess you kind of did, signage, maps, general, and all this. But is there a follow-up, or, you know, any thoughts about what to do with them?
Well, to remain consistent with the existing plan, we added the newer comments and public input that was subsequent to the original plan. And the data has already been analyzed and utilized by the Eagle Valley Trails Committee. So I don't think that there's any further analysis that needs to go into that. It's just simply for reference.
One of the things, when people, or at least the feeling is at staff level, is that, you know, people come up and they provide these comments, you know, during these workshops, during these other things, and we wanted to capture that and in a document that we're amending so that the people who did show up, really realize that these comments were taken seriously. And so that's why we did it. Donna, we really wanted to capture that, if you will, that snapshot in time of what the public thought about our single track trail system, you know, and that's that's what happened with the Eagle Valley report. We just copy and pasted it out of that into here. It's just another way to make the public know that when they show up, you know, these things get incorporated and paid attention to.
Okay, that's really nice, but, you know, some of the comments I think are really germane, and don't plan to do anything with them, just show them.
Yes.
So I'd just like to comment on 13.2.5, just because we're adding green sections that I agree with adding the reference from the public comments, but I think it would be great if you could, in parentheses or something, put a date range, because I think it's important that if we're using this as reference material, that it's again adding at a point in time. So just if we can add a date range into the document, I think it would be helpful. Thank you.
Good comment, and yeah, we can do that. Yep.
Okay, anything else, Craig?
Yes, absolutely. I want to thank the members of the Eagle Valley Trails Committee for the incredible amount of work that they have put into this. I especially want to thank Jeff Potter, Mark Kimbrough, and Lynn Zong, who worked with me very closely when we were putting together these amendments. Jeff Potter would like to be here tonight, but he is a very loyal and hardworking employee of the U.S. Postal Service, and it's Christmas time, and he was unable to attend. So, but I want to give him the credit that he deserves. And then also a thank you to Noman Incorporated. Eric Ingbar was instrumental in helping us assemble the maps. Yeah. And then the next slide. Okay, and then so. We would like to recommend that the Joint Committee approve these amendments with the changes noted, and so we can move forward to the Planning Commission.
Okay. Thank you, gentlemen. We've had some comments. Are there further comments from open space? Yes, Donna.
I'd just like to say that I'm absolutely thrilled that we are at this point. This has been very dear and near to my heart for how many years now? Long before Jen, I was bothering Roger about this. The only thing, you know, I mean, you did a fantastic job, Greg, of taking the EVTC report and putting it in this thing. marrying these two documents. I would like to say, I know that you were only focused on the changes for the Eagle Valley Trails Committee, but since you are doing these chapters, it's an opportunity to update some of the rest of it, because like in 11.1, it says within this overall priority are 7 specific objectives for implementation by 2015. Maybe this is an opportunity to update that and say, okay, we're going to go to 2020 now. And then, I mean, you actually could change under the first tier, number 4, the multi-use path along Highway 50 between Salaman and Lampa Lane is completed. And it's still on this list to be done. It's just, it's just saying that this is an opportunity to upgrade all of the chapter. I don't know if you want to, but it's there.
We discussed some of that, and we were concerned about scope creep because we wanted to stick to the, just to the original motion that was passed by the committees in May, and so we kept it just to address single-track natural surface trails.
Any other comments from open space? I'll make one comment. I don't know that it applies in terms of any changes, but I would note that there's quite a bit more than Eagle Valley here. You have Tahoe Basin, Dayton Valley, Washoe Valley, and Carson Valley. So anything that references that it's only Eagle Valley trails, I think probably ought to be looked at, but I don't know that there was any specific reference in that way. The Eagle Valley Trails Committee obviously is a named organization who has put a tremendous amount of time and created a really super document for Carson City, and that's really appreciated. And I didn't, in my looking at the packet, I didn't come across anything that implied it was only about Eagle Valley, but I mention it for what it's worth. You've spent more time with the document.
Okay, yeah, thank you, Chairman.
Any other Parks and Rec comments? Public comments?
Commissioner Curtis has.
Oh, okay.
Not so fast. No, I just want to echo some of the things that Donna was saying, and, I'm not asking for more staff work, but maybe some other opportunity would come up where we could take a look at this whole plan and update it as appropriate, so we have a document in the end that, kind of current and whatever. Probably not a lot of work involved in that, but it would be good. I understand we don't want to probably go through that tonight, so. And the other thing on the proposed motion, as you read it, or as you interpreted it, you said something and the other changes. Is that sufficient, Iris, for us to take action on this, just to mention and the other changes mentioned tonight? I don't think she heard me.
The map improvements in the date.
Maybe I can take a shot at that question before Iris gets there. What we're talking about is small administrative changes, like the deleting of the one section on the Tahoe Rim Trail. And so that's when Greg is referring to that, that's what we're referring to, just minor administrative stuff related to that, changing out numbers that don't sequence, those kind of things.
Well, and I think we were addressing maybe some changes to enhance the map, not to change the map itself, but perhaps to make it more clear on the index. The legend, yeah.
And the color coding, and again, we updated the land ownerships as well. So some of those smaller
And adding the date range.
Yes,
so that
adding the
people
date
know
range.
when that section of the
Yes.
plan was amended.
Yes.
So my question is, do we need to mention all that in the motion, or is that motion sufficient?
I propose that we just put a quick list together, and then in the motion, we can just reference the list. So with the list would be the map legends, and then just looking at improving kind of the clarity as discussed with the legends. I think, Jeremy, you mentioned that maybe you could offline give some year suggestions that those could be included. We had the date range on the list, the comments that were incorporated, so that the reader might get an idea of what dates those occurred. Was there any others? I think those were the two main ones. So then now when we make a motion, we'll just reference that list that I just described.
Right, and then one of the other things was in the first section was add the graphic. There was that other comment that Donna had about adding the trail difficulty rating. So what we'll do is, that motion is fine with what you're talking about, kind of listing that out. We'll go back through and we'll double check to make sure that our notes incorporate all the changes requested. So we'll take.
Again, one comment I was going to make also, which I'm sure you'll do as well, but to make sure that the links described where the full document will be, those will be accessible as well once it's all released.
All right. Any other public comment? Hi, Robin.
Robin Orloff here. I have a question actually on the actual map. Looking at I'm an advocate, of course, of Prison Hill, as everyone knows. How permanent are the map, the boundaries? I'm looking at the open space, the OHV area in the south end of Prison Hill, and it's the red line with the white around it. And I'm wondering what these arrows are that are going north, and then there's an arrow south.
Okay, the red lines for the double track motorized trails, we have not addressed that or updated that since the original UPMP. The only thing that we are addressing tonight is the natural surface single track trails. So anything that's on there with red or any other color than orange is something that was on the original document.
And is that something that will be subject to change as you define what the boundaries are, or?
Well, it's not subject to change with this amendment.
But let me try to answer your question another way. If you look at not only Prison Hill, the south end of Prison Hill, but look out into the pine net on your map, you'll see a variety of different arrows shooting out in there. At the time, we didn't have the resources to go out and identify all the two-track trails that are out in the pine nets or on Prison Hill, so the arrows are just indicating that OHVs are out that direction. It's a graphic representation of additional trails in that area. Now, a connectivity issue, thank you. It's a connectivity issue. That line is not indicating that we want OHVs further up on Prison Hill. The OHV folks stay on the south end of Prison Hill, and that's where we want them to stay. That arrow is not indicating, if that was your concern, that arrow is not indicating that those folks get to drive all over the central part of Prison Hill, because that's not what that's indicating. Does that help?
I actually had a similar thought that she did, because the legend indicates the arrows are future trail connections. That's what the legend actually says. So I actually thought the same thing, that the arrows indicated where potential development might occur.
Yeah, the arrows are indicating just connectivity. There are no thoughts of having anything further up on Prison Hill than the south end.
Might I suggest just changing that arrows indicate future connectivity rather than future trail connections?
I appreciate that comment and suggestion in terms of the arrows. And if this is a map that ultimately people are going to look at and use to navigate this area, correct? No? No, okay.
No, that's a very good question. That's a very good question. This is a planning document is what it is. It's not necessarily meant to be an on-the-ground trails map in the sense of I get to use this map to go hike a trail. That's why you see on it, you have dash lines, which are our desire lines, which where we want to go in the future, as well as the solid lines, which show existing. So this is a planning document, not a hands-on trail guide.
Okay. All right, so in some future discussion, I guess we'll discuss the boundaries of this area as it will occur on a map.
I think if you're referring to the boundaries of the motorized versus non-motorized area, that will not change. The boundaries will remain the same.
As they are on this map.
I don't know. This map doesn't.
All right,
yeah.
I'm just confusing, I guess.
It doesn't delineate the
Okay.
boundaries here.
All right.
I think to follow up on Robin's concern, the trails map that would be available through the Chamber of Commerce or some other location is going to clearly delineate the boundary between motorized and non-motorized. This is a planning document that doesn't address that issue directly in terms of what's shown on this map.
That's absolutely correct. Yeah, we plan on having maps that would be user maps. This is not for that purpose.
But that's an important distinction and one that we have heard many times in open space, so it's pretty important. Any other public comment? Mr. Kimbrough.
Mark Kimbrough for the record, and I'm only here to just give praise and thanks for a lot of work that had to be done, and Jen being new, and then putting it in Greg's and poor Vern's basket. And picking a date was really critical, and Jen is a planner, and she knows how important all this work was, and to get it and protect what we call in the business soft trails, and a lot of communities don't protect those, so you'll find as development comes in, you lose them, opportunities to get up in the Sierras or into popular places. So this protects them, and it's really important for a community to do that. Greg did a great job of putting this all together for a new guy who didn't have it in his background, but has it in his passion and his hiking and being out on the trails. And then Lynn and I and Jeff, we got past the baton. I mean, there were tons of people, Brett and Donna and Eric, and the list goes on of people. Oh, and Joel Dunn was a huge support. And the people and the question groups that gave us money, and the Friends of Silver Saddle Ranch was participants. So they passed us the baton to come through the finish line. So I give accolades there to all these people that supported that to get us here. And I know once this is in the plan, then it gives people like Jeff the motivation and the support to go out and build all this stuff now, which will keep Greg busy for his 20-hour-a-week job, plenty. So we're really excited and want to share that. And Donna, we just gave Donna an award at the Trail Summit for all the groups from the eastern front of the Sierras gathered, and Donna was given an award for all the work she does in this community. So that was nice to see that again, Donna. And I feel bad for Jeff not being able to be here to say thanks to everybody, but I know how appreciative he is. And as I said before, he was the visionary person for this. And the story with the Rim Trail, the visionary person had the idea, what a great thing to put a trail around Lake Tahoe, but he didn't spend one day on the trail building anything. Jeff was the visionary who's actually out putting it on the ground and fulfilling that dream and wish that he had for this community for soft trails. So I thank you for your support, and look forward to implementing some of these things in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. I think some important recognition there. Is there any other public comment?
Chaz McQuarrie, Carson City resident, member of Muscle Powered, and I would just like to say that we too would like to acknowledge the tremendous amount of work that's been put in by the Eagle Valley Trails Committee to get us to this point, and I just want to encourage both commissions to support it and vote yes, because we think it's a great idea, and we really appreciate that now the UPMP is going to be expanded to include single track trails, so we support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Chaz. Any other public comment? Okay, any final comments from staff or either the committee or the commission? All right, do we have a motion?
I would like to make a motion. I move to recommend to the Planning Commission approval of an amendment to the Unified Pathways Master Plan, UPMP, incorporating non-motorized trail system additions to the plan's map in Chapter 12, Chapter 9, off-street trails, Chapter 11, implementation, and Appendix 13.2, public comments, to also include the updates and improvements recommended this evening.
Thank you, Donna. From the Open Space Committee, do we have a second?
Second.
Second, Jeremy? Okay. Any public comment? Final discussion? All in favor say aye of the Open Space Committee? Aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay.
All right.
I'll make a motion.
You're going to do it, Brad?
I move to recommend to the Planning Commission approval of the amendment of the Unified Pathways Master Plan, the UPMP, incorporating non-motorized trail additions to the plan's map, Chapters 12, 9, on-street trails, Chapter 11, implementation, and Appendix 13.2, to include also the comments made with the list that we made tonight.
All right, is there a second? Okay. Is there any public comment? Hearing none? We don't take public comment. Any? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously from Parks and Rec.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. Okay.
Can we take a 5-minute recess, please?
Certainly. It's 10 minutes to 8. We're going to take a 5-minute recess and start promptly at 7:55. Yeah.
The timer's done.
I'm trying not to wear my jacket.
Okay, our next item is item 3D for possible action, review, discussion, and possible recommendation to the Board of Supervisors regarding the proposed Carson City Parklands easement policy and right of entry agreement. Jennifer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Jennifer Budge, Parks and Recreation Director. Given the lateness of the hour, I'm going to try to whip through this and give you more time for your questions. And thank you to those of you who have emailed me and already contacted me with your questions. They were really great. We needed that constructive feedback. This was sort of our first attempt to try to make this happen, and it's been a really good process. So today we're really talking about two sort of items and issues sort of shoved into one document, but as having a department easement policy and a procedure for anybody that should come forward and want to purchase or obtain an easement across any parklands. And when I say parklands, that means parks, trails, open space, any of the around 8,000 acres that are managed by this department. So I want you to understand that that's inclusive of this. Also, a right of entry agreement, a temporary right of entry agreement that's proposed for any non-park uses of parkland. So those are the sort of two topics that we're going to talk about tonight. Since I've been here, which just about a year and a half now, we've had several requests for easements and for permissions to use parkland for non-park purposes, whether it's through the development process or just ancillary uses, or also like utility companies coming forward. Right now we're having active conversations with Paiute Pipeline about them going through and obtaining easements for utility corridors through parklands and open space. So it's providing a process and procedure that's consistent, that's fair, and provides those applicants with clear direction on what's expected of them and the things that we're looking for moving forward. So the whole purpose, if you look at the bullet points in my staff report, is what I was just saying, is to establish and define those standards, inform prospective users and public of intentions, and have an open, transparent process. So should there be easements proposed, we want to notice the public. We want to invite their comment. We really want to let them know what is going on in their backyard. And it's trying to find a way that provides an opportunity to do that, as well as covering the costs for that. So any applicant would have to pay for that public noticing and not have the taxpayers be paying for those kinds of costs and those ancillary costs that go with it. And to make sure that we're receiving adequate compensation for those easements. In the past, obviously, only the Board of Supervisors can authorize realty action, and they have the power to do so. But it wasn't very consistent with compensation. A lot of times, lands and easements were given for no dollars. And I want to make sure that the city is being adequately compensated for giving up their land. When you relinquish an easement, even if it's a non-exclusive easement, you're still devaluing the property that's already the city's. And we want to make sure that we're following NRS and we're following those standards that are established in state law, and making sure that if there's mitigation or other efforts required, that we're doing so, and we're not just giving away the city's land. And we're trying to have a thoughtful process to do that. We also want to add, when I talked about mitigation, we really want to look at the natural, cultural, historical resources of our lands and making sure that what is proposed is consistent with that use. We have a lot of lands. I would say the majority of our lands are deed restricted. There's covenants. There's a lot of due diligence and review of these parcels to see if those uses would even be permissible. So it will require a lot of staff time as easements are proposed to make sure that we're doing a thoughtful review and process. And that's sort of leads to that dollar amount that's proposed. So we're proposing an application process. So if I'm NV Energy and I want to have an easement across Riverview Park to connect to a neighboring community, I would fill out the application, I would pay the fee, and I would also attach a preliminary title report paid for by me, the applicant, to the city, so they have some basis to do some initial review. And the fee that's established or proposed in this easement document policy is $2,450. That was recommended by our property manager, Stephanie Hicks, and it's comparable to a road abandonment fee. It's the lowest level fee that community development has for review. That's something I know we had a lot of questions from commissioners and board members about the fee and how we came up with that. But the intent is to cover all of the staff time and the due diligence to do that. So we can definitely discuss the pros and cons with that. I know some of the comments that I received is, why do we want to charge so much during the application fee? Why don't we try to take some money and get some mitigation to put on the ground by that applicant? So I think that's a great point of discussion we might have today. And then, so that policy that is provided for you would be the guide for how we move forward and how we evaluate easements and have priorities. And the basis is basically we wouldn't provide private party easements. So for example, if you're at Mills Park, we have probably 40 or 50 adjacent neighbors. We wouldn't want to entertain with each of those separate private party easements when they have adequate ability and locations to be able to access the park. If they already have an existing gate and they want to walk out into the park as a member of the public, they can do that. But we wouldn't want to enter into all those separate private party easements and devalue the property. However, we would want to look at easements that would benefit the public or have a benefit to, or a concern where there's a public health or safety issue, and that easement might resolve that. Those are the ones we want to entertain and try to help the public. Especially if there's a public health or safety issue, those are ones that would be in the community's best interest to try to consider. And then moving on to the right of entry agreement. This is my hope is that we would bring this to the Board of Supervisors, and the board would authorize certain staff to enter into a temporary right of entry agreement. So this would be something typically would be 1 or 2 days, no more than 6 months, depending on the situation. But for examples of, we get them at Mills Park a lot. We have had people that have plumbing issues and emergency situations on their property, and the only way for contractors to actually access the site is to bring their equipment or stockpile materials going through Mills Park, and that's a real challenge. We want to protect the city and protect our parkland, but we also want to help our neighbors to be able to mitigate whatever issue they have. So this would allow the private property owner, their contractors, their assigns, to be able to cross the park property, conduct their work for that temporary time period, and then when that work is done, the agreement is terminated. We get a lot of calls from contractors not working on city lands or not working on city projects that want to stockpile materials at some of our locations. And if it is a location that we think might work and might be appropriate and not adversely impact the environment, we might be able to provide that opportunity. We also might look at, when we talk about the fee schedule coming up too, is providing a fee associated with things like stockpiling and things of that nature. But we need to be able to have a legal document that describes that scope of work, allows them to enter and cross the property, conduct that task, and then and terminate that agreement afterward. So this is a lot, I know, to kind of understand, but I wanted to try to go somewhere, and I've been working with Stephanie Hicks. She's the property manager for Carson City. This will probably be a starting point once we work through the parkland easement policy that she'll be bringing forward for the city. So we have a city-wide easement policy too, because we don't want to be giving away the taxpayers' lands without adequate compensation and not have a standard procedure to go through. And this is just sort of our first draft, if you will, and I wanted to get your feedback. Depending on how many comments, I'm welcome to take it back to you again at your February meeting, or based on your direction, we could go forward.
Make sure they know the right of entry is just like a concept, because it would change depending on what
Sure.
is being done.
So as Iris pointed out, we have some work to do on the language in the right of entry agreement, and we fully understand that. So it's just that concept of that right of entry agreement. Obviously, the DA's office and would need to approve all of the final legal language that would go into that. But I just wanted to bring you a draft and that concept of what we might be able to move forward.
Thank you, Jennifer. Any comments, questions from open space members? If we can, we've got really two separate items here. And so maybe, we can take whatever comments, but it would seem to me on my first blush reading that the easement policy needs more work than the right of entry. And, we can talk about them individually or together. I have a few comments, but let's go and get Parks and Rec Commission comments on anything with regard to the presentation or the staff report first.
Any questions or comments from Park and Rec members?
Well, I'll make a comment.
Commissioner.
So, one, I want to say that certainly I concur that we need a policy for both right of entries and for easements, and whether it's temporary or whether it's permanent. I think that the initial work that they've done is a good starting point, but I certainly don't think it's ready to submit at this point. I think that I also am concerned, and I think it really falls into some of the other discussion points we've even had this evening, is do you start with parklands or do I wait to make a true city policy on right of entries? And so I get a little bit concerned, so I'll speak from a different hat tonight in fairness, because I always like to vote the same that I do in a committee level, that I do at a supervisor level. And so I find it difficult when I get things piecemeal from a committee versus a general impact to the whole entire city. And so I really welcome all of your input, suggestions, thoughts, and I think it's a great document starting point for then Stephanie to bring me a citywide policy. Because I don't think it matters if it's just parks. It could be a public works land, it could be a different city property, and everything should be mitigated and reviewed and looked at for appropriateness. So it's just, again, a general comment that I'm trying to make, that where I see the park staff coming into a process is if the easement being requested is on a parkland, then the park director can give this potential sign off. If it's a public works project, then that director, that it gets referred to the correct director of the property, if that makes any sense where I'm trying to go, because I hate to see us do a policy then that could be conflicting with a different policy. That's my comment.
Thank you very much for those comments. Would you prefer an overarching city policy that maybe would have different section if it needed to pertain to different uses or departments, or I'm not sure what I'm trying to say, but that would be your preference?
If I may, certainly for me, yes, and then the form you'd send the form to the proper department for the sign off or the comment or the mitigation or the plan. So I guess one of the questions that I really have more for everyone participating tonight is at what level that you all feel it's appropriate. Should it be a staff can do temporaries and right of entries, but you think permanent easements should come first governing body? That might have a jurisdictional, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. So let's say somebody wanted, the utility one was a good one, right?
So just for clarification, even if it was a temporary easement, even a temporary construction easement, that has to go to the Board of Supervisors, because only the board can do realty action. The right of entry for a temporary use, if the board directed the property manager or certain department heads or things like that upon their direction, then we could approve those right of entry agreements.
But you can still get a recommendation from a board as to whether the Board of Supervisors should support it or not. And I don't think I see temporaries or right of entries coming. And what's the definition of temporary? Because I couldn't find that. Is that less than 6 months?
There's two different temporaries we're talking about. So we're talking about temporary easements. So that could be it could be 10 days, it could be 2 years and still be a temporary easement, and then they relinquish that easement. But that temporary easement would still be appraised. There'd still be a price. The appraiser typically does like a per month rate for that easement that they would pay for. And then when that project is completed and they've completed all of their, scope of work to our satisfaction, at that time, the temporary easement would be relinquished. The temporary right of agreement that we're talking about for that use is typically under 6 months. And it's not recorded, the right of entry agreement. The easements would be recorded documents. So the person requests
can make the decision that I want a recorded right, even though it might be temporary, versus the right of entry for a home fix example. So I'm still trying, I think we need a little more work and definition and understanding.
We
And
could,
again, the
we
full
could clarify
policy.
and put some additional definitions in there to maybe help. But that temporary the temporary easement that you're talking about, there's a value to that, and there's a changing hands of that land on a temporary basis. And that's why that document is recorded. And the right of entry agreement is just a use. So it's for that non-park use of parklands on a temporary basis.
Have a comment? You have a comment? Yeah. I thought it said, and I may have misread it, that all of these were going to come to like the Parks Commission if it's in a park.
If it's an easement, yes.
Yeah, if it's an easement.
Yes.
Okay, but if it's a right of entry,
That could be an emergency situation.
emergency situation maybe, but, some guy needing to help, deal with somebody's toilet in a house that's next to a park. But a guy wants to put 400 yards of pipe in to store some places. That, to me, it's almost like even though they're temporary, one is certainly, a no-brainer, but the other one may require some thought. And so I'm wondering, are you saying that all the temporary right of easement would be coming to you to sign off on, and then anything that's the other would be coming?
My intent was that the temporary right of entry agreements would not come to this board, because then that would slow down the process and not let us authorize those uses. But any easements that would be proposed, or any easement applications that we would receive, would all go to either the Parks Commission or the Open Space Advisory Board as appropriate.
Jennifer? I just see a couple little housekeeping items in the right of entry agreement. I noticed we mentioned Washoe County. We're going to change that.
Yeah, we're gonna clean that up. We were just marking it up, yeah. I provided the right of entry agreement to Stephanie Hicks for that as our starting point, and then we had multiple documents we were sort of throwing at it. So we recognize that it has some work to do. Thank you.
Some comments that I had. The right of entry agreement, to me, is important to allow processes to move forward, and for the staff to be able to grant that without a lot of red tape or a lot of delay. I think if there were ever a question about the extent of the request, you could bring it forward if you needed to, but I hate to see us put an applicant with a fairly simple request that is pretty non-controversial through the process of getting on our agenda and going forward that way. So with that, there are some housekeeping items, I think, on the right of entry agreement. The first paragraph concludes with the term licensee includes, and it has a blank, and I'm not sure what that would be. Under terms of entry, we say the licensee shall not fill material from the property. I'd be a little cautious about some of the absolutes in here, and I think you need to leave a little more flexibility. I can see that if you want somebody to clean up something that they're doing as a temporary entry, and they're creating a roadside ditch or doing something like that, there may well be some fill that should be taken away. And I hate to paint us into a corner. So I think a little more flexibility that way is something that I would recommend. With regard to the easement policy, I do think this is a great place to start, but I think there's more work to be done. And I'm open to the concept of a citywide policy. I do have a little bit of concern that the way we set the fee for coming